Welcome to Ed Table Talk. This is your May Ed Table Talk show. Our show topic for today is the issue of privacy and looking at schools and how are they handling that issue and what strategies can we use to help students engage in, social learning and all the kinds of things they do in their personal lives, but do that in the context of education. So thank you for all of you who listened in and participated in last month's show. I know we had a lot of good engagement online and tweeting around, so really appreciate everybody's engagement. It was great to see so many of you at the SIIA Education Industry Summit just last week. I can't believe that was just last week. And again, lots of nice comments there about Ed Table Talk, but also good discussions around all of these. And in fact, there was even a panel there talking about this issue of safety, security, privacy, all of that. And just as I was talking to our guests just prior to the show, that they had a bunch of lawyers up there, and we're not going to talk about the legal side of this. We're going to be really pragmatic and talk about how is it that you create applications or create environments where good learning can take place without the issues of privacy getting in the way, or at least some strategies for designing around that and how to model that. So we have three great guests with us here today. I'll introduce them in just a moment. This issue of privacy is not something that certainly is new. It's certainly been around for a while. I think what the digital world has done is accelerate the problem because it's certainly a lot easier to get access to information if it's misplaced or not handled correctly. And, I think some of it is fear of the unknown as well. And when we look at, recent concerns around credit card numbers being stolen from companies like Target or a number of other vendors, I think people get worried, and probably justifiably so, around that kind of information. I think it's a double-edged sword, however, in terms of, I liken this to when you take your child to the physician. I love asking people this question. I mean, how many parents withhold information from their physician? I don't tell my physician what's with my kid. I want them to figure that out on their own. What I hear from most parents is I tell them everything. I tell them everything that's happening because I want them to be able to diagnose issues. I want them to be able to foresee problems. I want them to be able to, support my child's health. And to some extent, we have a challenge when it comes to education to garner the same respect and the same engagement with that information. We don't want parents to withhold any information to the educator who can be helpful in helping address students' needs, either areas where the child excels or areas where they're challenged, and also socially helping kids interact with one another. And but at the same time, privacy is absolutely key. And this information has a tendency to come back, and anonymity, particularly with kids under 13, being absolutely key. But at the same time, we want good quality instruction to take place. So with my little intro there, let me go ahead and thank first our wonderful sponsor, and that's MCH Strategic Data. Just absolutely wonderful group of people. Had a chance to see several of them again at the SIA conference and chat with John and others somewhat regularly around their offerings. Again, if you're looking for good market data, they have now an offering that updates that data monthly and gives you an opportunity to really get your finger on the pulse of what's happening with your customers and what's happening in general in the market, and really reach out with your latest offerings. So again, our key sponsor is MCH Strategic Data. So with that said, let me go and introduce our guests. Actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'll start with Francesca Venning. And I have to tell you, Francesca, I know from my first month at Apple. Is that right, Francesca?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I think actually Francesca predates my wife in terms of people I know. And so Francesca and her husband David have been good friends forever. And Francesca's been on an interesting journey in her professional life, but really, really just a wonderful, insightful individual. So Francesca, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for not going how far back that was in actual time. That was a little scary there. So right now, I am a learning technology consultant. I work with schools and districts on everything from planning for technology implementations to professional development to on-site support and mentoring. My special passion is working with districts that have that serve communities of large immigrant families, English as a second language students, and probably that has a lot to do with it. My doctorate happens to be in first and second language acquisition. But as Michael said, we know each other way back from Apple. So in my time at Apple, I was a senior marketing manager focused on one-to-one implementations and also an Apple professional development trainer. So I've seen a lot of the country and worked with a lot of great schools and districts and teachers throughout the years. And it's really a pleasure to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Francesca. And I think, your background, having been in the business world, but now really working much more directly with a lot of schools, not that you weren't before, I think, brings a reality check to all of this conversation. So thank you again for being here. Let's go next to Tim Discipio. I haven't known Tim quite as long, but I've certainly had some really great conversations with Tim. I think it's been several years, even when you came up to the Pacific Northwest for some other meetings. So, Tim, maybe give us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to now.
Sure. Well, thanks, Mike. I'm one of the founders of the company ePals, which was a pioneering social learning community started in 1996 to connect teachers in their classrooms worldwide. It was actually one of the first social networks on the web, but the difference was that we were for K-12 schools to find each other safely, connect using safe, policy-managed collaboration tools, whether it was email or blogs in the early days, and then moving on to virtual workspaces where workflow and productivity tools could be used. And at our height, we were reaching about 29 million teachers, students in 200 countries. And a lot of that resource was offered free to schools. We did have premium services that could be bought on a subscription basis. But we were one of the first sites to get compliant to the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act and became compliant to all the various things that were out there in the early days where there was a lot of pressure to make these offerings to K-12 schools something that was safe, reliable, and specifically built to the K-12 market, which I know Jeff knows all about too. But previous to ePals, I got into the internet marketing and website design space very, very early on. And in fact, one of the first phone calls ever made was to two guys in the Stanford University lab who were maintaining a website called Yahoo, and they were still at school, housing it. So it was quite early. That's been interesting to watch the whole space grow up, and getting into K-12 has just been it's been terrific. It's gone through all different flows, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, good. Thanks. And you mentioned COPA, and I just wondered if you provide a safe place for people where they can actually address the needs of COPA. Would that be called a Copa Cabana, do you think?
That was our brand name from 98 to 2000, Mike.
So on that note, Jeff, I'm going to turn to you. And you and I know each other actually from first conversations, I think, with N2H2. That was back in 2000. So certainly have watched.
I started Gaggle.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been fun watching you grow the organization and the challenges that you've been grappling with. So again, give us a little bit of background about what you've been up to.
Well, sure. I think it's a good idea to think of Tim and I as almost twins, an East Coast twin and a West Coast twin. Our careers have kind of mirrored each other in many ways. I am the founder and CEO of Gaggle, and we provide a communication and collaboration tools for K-12 students. Have from the beginning. Like Tim, it's email and blogs and whatever the latest, tools that students and teachers want to use, but use it safely right? It's all about safety and security and compliance with Children's Internet Protection Act, and kind of evolved to a whole digital assignment management. We service about 2.5 million students, and we see all sorts of interesting things that students do for learning, and some of the trouble they get into, and that's what I can contribute on today. I want to give a shout out to Roger Wagner because I know he's on the line, and I have modeled my career in business on Roger. So thanks, Roger, for.
Oh no. I'm kidding, Jeff. Go ahead.
Oh well, look, I'm proud to say that I definitely did. I modeled my business on Roger, and I hope he's hearing this. That grassroots passion is what education is all about. I saw it in him, and I saw it in his company, Hyper Studio, Roger Wagner Publishing, and I'm proud to carry on that passionate tradition.
Now, do you have as many groupies as Roger does?
Oh, I can rival Roger with groupies. Just come to his seat.
Good. Well, we'll have to do a comparison there. So, let's go ahead and jump into our. Thanks for that, Jeff. Let's go ahead and jump into our first segment. We're going to get to the real heart of this topic, but we're going to start out early with our segment that people tell us they love, which is called "You Can't Handle the Truth." And "You Can't Handle the Truth," for those of you who haven't listened to this before, is a set of 3 rumors, of which one is only true. Only one is true, and they're all around the topic that we're discussing today of privacy and anonymity. So we're going to go through. Each of our guests is going to read one of those rumors, and at the end of today's show, we're going to discuss those a little bit, and then we'll find out which is actually the truth, not just a rumor. So let's go ahead and start first with you, Tim. You're going to read the rumor, haves and have-nots.
Okay. The matter of equity and access has plagued education ever since the first microcomputers became available in schools. Equity remains an issue to this day, as most schools have not found a sustainable model to ensure every child has access to the technology they need. The homeroom teachers at Bartholomew Middle School in central Pennsylvania have worked hard to bring their social science lessons to life by having students explore topics in contemporary news and relate those lessons they built in Moodle. Students work collaboratively to build ties between the district's curriculum and the news. Teacher, Mrs. Stafford, tells us, quote, "We found a way to spend more one-on-one time with our students as they work on areas of interest to them," unquote. At the first open house, however, several parents expressed concerns about their child's privacy. Having an account on Moodle, searching the Internet, expressing their thoughts in electronic form were among the concerns. Mrs. Stafford recounts, quote, We had to pull the 7 students whose parents expressed concern into their own group, give them newspapers, and have them discuss topics amongst themselves. I try to listen in occasionally, but I can't be there the entire time." End of quote. One of the students shares, quote, "The best part of this group is that we all get to read the comics and our horoscopes." Mrs. Stafford finds that she and the other teachers do not have time to manage both the digital and analog programs. One of her colleagues chimed in, quote, "Honestly, by honoring their parents' request, we're leaving those 7 children behind."
Well, great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Tim. That's haves and have-nots, where, in fact, some parents have opted out of allowing their children to have access to an online environment because of their concerns about privacy and anonymity, and the inability of the school to be able to provide equal access, or at least quality of access, due to that. So thank you again for reading that, Tim. We're going to move next to Jeff. Jeff is going to read the rumor, which is loose lips make security slips.
I love my title. That's great. Panel, do you remember when going steady meant pinning your girlfriend or giving her your Letterman jacket? Well, times have changed. A real sign of love is trusting your sweetheart with your password or login information. When asked about the security of their personal access codes, most young people perceive them to be secure, despite the fact that over 60% have experienced a security breach directly related to sharing their personal information. Researchers found that this is gender inequity in these findings, as boys are more likely to share information than girls. One researcher shared, I remember giving the locker combination to my girlfriend, but there was no way she was going to give me hers. Not only did girls keep such information private from their boyfriends, only rarely did they share such information with their female friends. The IT at a Minnesota school district added, while we want students to change their passwords occasionally, we don't want to do so indiscriminately. I'm afraid to actually calculate the number of hours spent resetting student email and server passwords. I hope you appreciate the gender switch there, Michael. Wasn't easy for me. We may teach our children that sharing is a good thing. However, this is one area where keeping it to yourself is the best strategy.
Oh, my gosh. You know, you may want to switch careers here, Jeff. That was brilliant.
I am taking stand-up comedy. You can see me on Saturdays.
Are you sitting down or standing right now?
I'm standing.
So that was Jeff sharing Lips Make Security Slips around students sharing their PINs and login information as part of their showing that they truly are in love. So let's go to our last rumor, and this one is called From the Mouths of Babes. Francesca is going to read this one to us.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about, I'm going to date myself here, but if anyone remembers the old Art Linkletter, Kids Say the Darndest Things, that could have been the title for this one, too. Anyway, here we go. Blended learning offers a rich variety of experiences through which students can engage with the content and understand different perspectives. This approach is particularly helpful for elementary educators who are used to providing a wide variety of activities for their students. Integrating technology into that experience can be challenging for some. One teacher at an elementary school in Washington State found a great way to integrate technology with hand-drawn art. As part of a children's art walk in the city center, the teacher had students create paper mosaics of a flower in a pot. The technology component was the use of a QR code where those who attended the show could listen to an audio recording of the student describing their artwork. A few people stood around scanning QR codes and enjoying the young fourth-grade artist's description. One recording, however, made those looking at the show stop and think. This particular child started their description with their full name, first, middle, and last, precise birth date, and where they live. He also gave his parents' name, occupation, and place of work. It became clear that something as innocent as an art show could easily expose a naive child to a loss of privacy.
Well, and I don't think that there was actually any problem that took place, but from what I understand, the group was rather surprised. So, you know, as you said, out of the mouth of babes, or the kids say the darndest things. Thank you for reading that, Francesca. I really appreciate it. So, what we're going to do at the end of the show is have a little conversation with our guests about which one of those is the truth. One of them is, in fact, the truth. So those of you who are listening, and think about that, and you can go ahead and tweet what you think to at EdTableTalk or hashtag EdTableTalk, hashtag EdTableTalk. And we know we'll get a conversation out there. Let us know which one you think is the truth. So with that said, again, I want to thank quickly MCH Strategic Data for their support of our show. Again, always appreciate their help and support as we put on these shows for you, those out of the K-12 education industry. So let's go ahead and jump in with our guests to discuss this topic of looking at security, privacy, and how do we get around those issues? How do we grapple with those issues while really still engaging kids in good quality instruction? Who wants to start? Any thoughts? I love dead air.
Well, this is Tim. I'll
go ahead,
start
Tim.
This off. You know, in the beginning, when we started ePals, we had no interest in building an email or any kind of collaboration tool. What it was in the beginning was really a a matchmaking service for teachers to find each other in schools worldwide. And I remember when a teacher told us, look, we want to get the classrooms collaborating, and we want to get the kids even going one-on-one so they can be communicating with each other. We want to pair them up and match them and do a project together. It might be a cross-cultural project or a science experiment, but we need a collaboration tool. And I remember one of our team members saying, well, yeah, why don't you use a Yahoo account or a Hotmail account to do that? And I remember the teacher saying, there's no way I'm going to set my kids up with a Hotmail or Yahoo account. We need something specifically designed for an elementary school 5th grade class. And that was sort of the birth of, wow, this is a whole other side to learning and collaboration that we hadn't seen. All we wanted to do is be a matchmaker. We're going to match up, and then you go do whatever you need to do with the tools that you have or can find, right? And remember, it was the era of free email. No one built an email and sold it to anyone, right? And I remember the strategy session, like, oh my gosh, this has got to cost money because this is going to be a lot of our time to maintain this particular technology and let schools use it, right? And that was also the era of children's online privacy, how we're going to protect kids, were they going to use the Internet? I mean, a lot of people don't remember, but the Internet, almost didn't make it as a learning tool. I mean, these conversations, it's a whole different situation we're in now, but most districts were not keen on giving the web to students. Maybe it was a teacher resource. Teachers would pull down information and then somehow get it, a projector in a classroom to kids. Whole different era, right? I left ePals about a year ago, but when we were actively meeting with school districts, I don't know if Jeff, found this too, but, prior to going into a school or district, you try to find online what their Internet usage policy is, what their technology vision is. There are a lot of publicly posted documents from board meetings and strategy sessions on what the school district's trying to do, and you can get a glimpse and a snapshot of what their 5-year plan is. We always found that about 90% of school districts we met with were in breach of their own district privacy and Internet usage and safety policies. I know it sounds crazy, but, they were set up at one point, and then the whole web came on, right? The tools that some of the providers, and I'll kind of wrap this up in a second, tools that some of the providers offer were built based on school feedback. A lot of people say, wow, how did you have the idea for this? Well, yeah, there was an initial idea, but I think Jeff would agree that our products were built with constant feedback over, a decade and a half of now we need this, or could you build it with this kind of safety? Or we want a different kind of safety control at the middle school than the elementary school versus the high school. And so, and I think most entrepreneurs, I know the founder of Edmodo confirmed this, that, their product was built with constant teacher feedback, right? So the idea of safety and filtering and keeping the kids on task, these weren't things that, vendors just think up. These are school administrators and teachers requesting these things to hone in, refine the environment and learning ecosystem that's going to work best.
Let's hear from Jeff, Tim, a little bit about reflecting on some of that, and I'm sure, Francesca, you have experience. So go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. So similar to Tim, I was at the TCA conference in 1998, and I just happened to ask a teacher, are you using email with your students? And she said, no, my school district would never let my kids have an email account. So I thought that was crazy because email had changed the way I interacted with people. I was collaborating with artists and programmers and all sorts of people to build products, that I wasn't even meeting. And so I started asking the why questions. It was really all about safety and security. Who are the kids going to communicate and what are they going to communicate about? And that was the genesis for my company and my product. And like Tim said, we've developed it over time responding to teachers and their requests. In some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad because we have a tendency to want to please everybody and we keep adding new functionality, but sometimes, that gets the way of simplicity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know,
I mean, go ahead, Francesca.
Yeah, looking at this from a from a practitioner's perspective, you know, a lot of this about privacy and whatever is a sort of top-down thing. It's in a school or a district. It's controlled by IT. They understand it, but that isn't the way the teacher in the classroom functions. We don't spend a lot of time thinking months in advance, oh, I want to use this website or I want to use this tool, online tool. It's you know, it's Sunday night and I want to do this with my kids tomorrow morning. What can I use to do that? And so the whole idea of protecting their students gets in the way then of their ability to use those tools because we don't have enough time and we don't understand enough about, you know, what is acceptable and not acceptable.
Can I comment on privacy a little bit? Because I think we need to make sure we address this, right? Whenever there's a district or a school that's providing the accounts and the access, that is owned by the school district, just like our employers own our email. And we have to be clear, there is no expectation of privacy organizationally. It's to the outside world that I think that that the organization, the school district, and the school owes to protect the students' information. But internally, we can't have privacy or we won't have accountability. And to protect students, we have to have accountability.
Right, and that's why, you know, that's why a lot of teachers do not do, you know, a lot of things with online tools or whatever because their district is not there yet, and they're not going to go and create Gmail accounts or Yahoo accounts or whatever for their students or allow their students to do those. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of, though, that also worries me is, and I was just in a classroom yesterday where students were using an online tool to create a presentation, and I said to the teacher, but these kids need an email account to do that. And she said, oh, I just told them to make up one at home and bring it into class and use it. That kind of thing I see frequently.
Yeah, see that, you know, and part of the problem, and I'll point a couple of polite fingers around to the industry over the last couple of years. Part of the problem has been a lack of information and effort on behalf of the Department of Education and the state DOE officials to make schools aware of education solutions that are specifically designed for the education market, and that built-in safety, filtering, monitoring, on-task, and privacy policies that adhere to the way K-12 wants to use these kinds of tools. And Jeff was in the room when I stood up. I reached the boiling point on hearing, you know, one of our Department of Ed officials, and this had been going on for months, you know, promoting mass market, you know, general tools, you know, Facebook, you know, they were encouraging, you know, teachers have to get on, they got to use Facebook, kids want to use Twitter and Google tools. And it wasn't so much against Google, but the constant mention of Facebook and Twitter, and if you're not using it to engage your classroom, it's like, oh my gosh, there are 30 solutions that have Twitter-ish, Facebook-ish properties and a lot of other things that make the K-12 workflow very productive. But we're not talking about any of them. And God forbid you should promote one of them, right? But you can promote a general market tool. And I had a big problem with that. And Jeff, I don't know if you remember the San Diego conference we were at, where you know, that just started to overheat, you know, in a room. And, you know, we started to call it out, you know, and of course we were conflicted. We were with, you know, vendors who, you know, were actually there at the show exhibiting, right? And but there's an information problem, right? If there are tools that can make a school more productive, you know, and you can use government E-rate funds and subsidies to help pay for it, you know, this is the kind of information schools need to make really great decisions, right? And anyway.
Let me just ask, Francesca, what do you see around the use of those more general market tools, and what do you see the place of those being?
Quite honestly, I know that they're used in a lot of schools. Most of the schools and districts I work with do not use them, do not allow them. Just because they are too open-ended and they don't feel they can get enough control on them. I think Tim mentioned it earlier, maybe it was Jeff, about, internet searching. I still have lots of schools I work with where internet searching is still on, just searching the internet is still a big, huge deal. And even with filtering, it's still a big, huge deal. I mean, I was in this great third grade classroom the other day, and the teacher, they were doing Charlotte's Web, and the teacher asked the students to go look for a picture on the internet that represented Frisky, because Wilbur the pig was being frisky. And even with their huge internet filtering system, we got pictures that came up that were absolutely inappropriate around the word frisky. So it's those kind of instances that they go, okay, can't do this, and they shut down.
I would much rather see, Michael, I was just going to say that I'd much rather see those as teachable moments, right? We cannot protect our kids from every danger, every inappropriate thing in the world. We have to see those as opportunities. And I totally agree with you, but teachers are under so much scrutiny that for many of them it just scares them. And I agree.
I completely agree. And look, they're amazing tools. Facebook and Twitter, groundbreaking tools. And there are applications for education, but to be trying to force fit Twitter into the classroom is not productive when there are tools that can do the assignment, carry it out, get the whole classroom ecosystem collaborating a lot faster, that are designed for whatever that task is. And I can tell you that, as a vendor that's been in K-12, 18 years, I left my company a year ago, as I said earlier, so I have a different perspective. But when you're a vendor, you're trying every moment of the day to deliver what teachers and administrators and students and parents want for the learning, for the digital learning era. You do. I mean, that's what drives you. Is just, Jeff and I were fierce competitors. We were nice to each other. We've remained industry friends, but we not a week went by we didn't wonder, what Jeff was up to, what he was going to introduce, right? And so we were always, and you would get that market intelligence from asking schools, what do you think the next big thing is? What new feature set do you think takes this a step, further, right? And the other thing I wanted to say is, nothing's for free, right? Nothing's for, even free tools that are out there, as we've seen, the situation Google got into. Well, yeah, the tool was free to schools, but there was something else happening on the back end, right? So our marketing message to schools was, look, do you know what you're going to get? We're going to sell you this collaboration tool. You can use the community for free. We're going to sell you this collaboration tool, and by the way, it's E-rate subsidized, so you can get E-rate dollars to help pay for it. But that's how we get compensated. We're making money. We built this tool. We're going to provide it to you. We're going to support it. We're going to train you on it, and you're going to compensate us. That's how we make money. You should, and I always tell schools, know what your provider's business model is. Ask them, how do you guys make money from this? You cannot, it's almost impossible to sustain an operation. I know what it costs to run our organization, even if we had 0 customers, just to have the infrastructure, to have all of these tools and content and resources costs a certain amount of money, right? And so we decided early on, we could go advertising, we could go, let's sell the product. We'll just offer a great product, we'll support it, and that's how we're going to make money, and we're going to be up front, we're going to tell the school district.
So, Tim, we're going to come back to this conversation. We're going to take a little break. We do have some questions that are coming in from our listeners, one of which has to do with exactly the topic, Tim, that you were just asking. that has to do with mining student data to keep costs free. But we'll come back to that. What I want to do is stop for a moment and tell our audience, listeners, that one of the ways we compensate our guests, actually the only real way except for the pleasure of being in each other's presence, is by allowing them to make a donation to a particular teacher project that a teacher is driving in their classroom. Hopefully you've heard of Donors Choose. Donors Choose is an environment where teachers can put up requests for projects that they're doing with their students, and each one of our guests has selected a project that we donate $50 to in their name. So I want each one of our guests to tell you a little bit about the Donors Choose project that they selected, and then we'll get back to discussing a little bit more about the privacy and security. So the first one, Jeff, you selected It's Here, Common Core.
So this is fascinating to me. I'm blessed with 3 daughters, and my middle daughter is now in 6th grade. But her 4th grade teacher from a few years ago, I found that she had something on Donor's Choice. She's looking to get a laptop to meet her Common Core goals. And I was fascinated by this because just 2 years ago, she would not even agree to read email from parents, right? She was that technology averse, and to see that Common Core has opened up her mind that she needs to expand as a professional, I was excited to support that.
That's great, and that's wonderful, Jeff, and that's all the reasons why teachers put those out there. So perfect. Francesca, let's go to you next. A book for me, a book for you, a book for everybody. I made that last
book
part.
For everybody, yeah. So even though I love technology and I love how it really enhances the learning and the teaching, I always love when students have an opportunity to actually have a real book in their hand. And so I picked this project. It's a local school with a large English language learning population, and the teacher is looking to be able to buy more classroom library books, classroom library books, so her students can take books home with them and read at home. And so near and dear to my heart. So I picked this particular project.
That's great. Well, thank you for that, Francesca. And last, Tim, apparently you have Apple Learners. What do you know about that project?
Well, Michael, I'm embarrassed to say I was in travel and I had your staff pick one that they liked near me, and they donated something to a New York City school. So, but I don't know much about it.
Well, you're going to have to learn something about it.
I know. But they found something. They relayed it to me when I was in the car driving somewhere. And but
perfect.
Anyway, thanks so much. I think
we're happy to spend your money to help education. So thank you for participating, Tim. And I know the team here was happy to look through those. So let's go back to the topic that we have at hand here. And I do want to, before we get to some of the data that you shared with us, Francesca, let's talk a little bit about those business models and just spend a short bit of time. I don't want to mention particularly the name of the organization that the question was asked about by one of our listeners, but tell me, this issue about sort of mining student data and using that data to subsidize or in some cases pay for the full cost of running a service. Maybe, Jeff, you can start and tell us whether that's a model that you looked at or if you're aware of that being used.
Well, early on when we started Gaggle, it was in the 2000 era. It's all about the eyeballs. And we had a free version of our service that we did have advertisements on, right, because that's the way the world worked. But it's really, ads are distracting to students, right? That's not educationally appropriate. And so we moved off of that model fairly early.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I worked for N2H2, we also had an advertising subsidized model. And what was interesting was, and we were very careful about what ads we actually showed, but there was one about telling kids not to smoke marijuana. Well, it turns out just bringing up a picture of a marijuana leaf was disruptive in the classroom, even though the messaging was consistent. So, you're right. It can be very
vacation
disruptive.
ads on an island often depicted a bikini-clad model, right?
Yeah, we
Yes.
we on our content page where you went to find classrooms to connect with and projects you could participate in, we didn't call it advertising, we called it sponsorship, and there is a difference if you sit down and think about what you're trying to do. We would get compensated from corporate foundations to do a STEM project where classrooms are participating in something science related. Or if they're practicing language and culture, there was a language learning company that wanted to sponsor that. But it had to be vetted. The team would talk about it, look at the creative, and we said no more than we said yes. And including, I remember someone wanted to give us $30,000 to put something on the site, and it was a no.
So are you aware, any of the three of you, aware of anybody right now who is mining student data and, selling trends and information related to that data in order to subsidize their business?
Michael, I think one of the big issues of the last couple of months is that we're not aware of what we don't know, right? I mean, some of the companies are not really transparent, and even the statements they make are obfuscated, and it's not clear what are they really doing with the data. And I think that's the big issue going on right now.
And if you try to go and find that information, it's very varied and very convoluted.
So do you assume the worst? What do you see, Francesca, in terms of, is it essentially ignorance is bliss, or?
No. I think most districts are assuming the worst and working from that assumption. And
I agree.
And I think part of that is that they do have a lot of concern about their parents and their community constituency. And so, if I could lead into this little bit of data, Michael,
please,
if that's all right.
Yeah,
because I think that fits right in. So, I was very intrigued by it was a small survey done by Common Sense Media. I think probably most of our listeners are familiar with that organization. They're not for profit that focuses on children and families and how media and technology is used. But they did a very small. They commissioned a very small 800 telephone interview in January around student privacy, and there were a number of different interesting points. But the one that really struck for me is they asked these interviewees whether they knew how their child's school was currently collecting, using, storing student information, and a good 62% of them of the interviewees knew very little or nothing at all about how their child's school was collecting and using data. And I think that's the thing that districts have not addressed enough. They're using it as they're scared of it, but on the other hand, they're not doing enough to help parents understand so that they don't get a backlash from it if something goes wrong.
So that's because I think we're in a third wave. I think we're in a third wave of ed tech. Jeff and I grew up in the first wave, and boy, you had to be really. I mean, I remember, going into a New York City school and presenting what we did, and the school principal saying, "I think the whole idea of giving kids email to collaborate is irresponsible." Right now, we've come a long way, right? And social media hit, and then the thing it just blew open, right? Now, and we haven't been too concerned about any of this until big data came into the picture a few years back, right? Then now you've got everyone focused on that. I think what you're going to see now is you're going to start to see some data standards, interoperability frameworks, and governance, and how providers are going to have to reveal how this stuff is managed and where it goes and when it goes, and also business models. Who are you? Are you a company, a nonprofit? where does it go? But I agree with Francesca that, look, if you're a provider in this industry and you want to have a future, you better be doing things right. And that's why I say, if you're talking to a provider and they don't upfront, I know Jeff does as well. If they're not providing the business model upfront in terms of how they make money, you have to dig into this. Your CIO or your district CIO or consultant, needs to dig into this. Fortunately, most of the companies that are real players are very well known, and again, like I said earlier, they're trying to get a leg up on competition, but to damage that trust, I mean that's just huge. And we don't have to mention names, but the big company that's been sort of called out on this recently, I'd say if it were a small company, not very well known, they'd be in huge trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some. I think some people get a free pass in the industry because they are well known. Their greater contribution is recognized, and it's the small, tiny providers that unfortunately have to go through a lot more stress and rigorous vetting.
Guys, I'm a little concerned as I read the common sense information, and I'll share something with you. I'm concerned about the backlash that our policymakers are going to go too far. One of the things that Common Sense reported is that the parents would like, and 91% of the parents said they would like schools to notify parents before they share students' personal data with private companies. Now, in theory, that sounds great, but personal data could be as simple as a username, right? So all of us online providers, we have to have some basic information to maintain accounts and to function. I'm concerned about where the policymakers will take this, and they might actually, curb growth of student learning.
Yeah.
Well, and we actually talked about this a little bit when we saw each other last week, Jeff, and that is that, I think we shouldn't talk about personalized versus other learning. We should be talking about, asking parents, do you want personalized learning where we have to know something about the learner, or do you want impersonalized learning? I don't think there's a parent who's going to select impersonalized learning for their child. The question now is, how is that data used? How is it stored? I know that working with one organization that had a tool that allowed students to create activity plans and projects, the school district was very interested and said, but they didn't want the software to know anything about who the learner is from session to session. And we said, well, that's interesting, but you can't do personalized and not know who the learner is in one form or another. So I think it's a pressing issue. Well, Francesca, how are you grappling with that issue? And then we're gonna turn to some other items on our agenda here.
Yeah, we a lot of us are working on trying to make that learning more personalized, and I think, unfortunately, we don't have any real good solutions. I mean, we do have students frequently who just can't be part of the technology. I do want to mention that, because I deal with communities and schools and communities that have large immigrant populations, that many times we have a lot of backlash from parents because they don't want any information about their child or their family anywhere in what they view as a government system. Even if it's not a government, even if it's a private company, because they're undocumented. And so, this is a big issue in California. I'm sure it's an issue other places, but that's something else that I think the industry needs to consider a little bit, is that we do have families who are very afraid of any information and how we deal with that appropriately.
Well, I know this is not going to be the last time.
And you also have these siloed offerings. You got just numerous products and service solutions that are all disconnected from each other, and this is problematic, right? So you're replicating the setup and data process, 18 times for 18 different vendors, and One of the things that we've called for is, the industry is a pegboard in terms of the applications and solutions you can use. And what schools need to understand are what are the things that are essential, right? What are the things that we all know that you need a student information system. Okay, good start, right? So what are the other things now? And how do schools evaluate these things in terms of their need, right? Does a K-12 school need a learning management system? Do the kids need email, right? You get into the thing, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone needs to keep records. You need an SIS. Where does it go from there? And in the era, the one-to-one device deployment is coming. It's coming. Every single school district CIO I talk to says, it's going to happen in our district probably a year out or a year and a half out or 2 years. Or in my district, it could be 3 or 4 years. But, we know we're moving there. And that's just going to pull along the digital curriculum, right? So one of the things, if there were one thing I'd love the U.S. Department of Ed to do is to, create a snapshot of what the pegboard looks like, right? What are all the product categories and solutions that fill them so people can understand what goes where, right? And actually, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would even like down a little lower because I won't name the vendor, but a very large education vendor who supplies 3 to 4 different products, online products, to the schools I work with, and each one has a different interface. It has a different student login, and none of the data is connected on the back end.
Yeah.
So even within the industry itself, and even within some of the vendors themselves, there's no consistency.
Yeah, my daughter has 12 usernames and passwords she uses for her school solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a show that's coming up actually on July 22nd called Standards Everywhere, looking at the technical side of education standards. And we'll be talking about interoperability. We'll be talking about single sign-on and some of those issues. So, these are all very, very much interrelated. And I invite you to listen into that show and everybody else who's on this as well. Unfortunately, we've come to the time when we need to move on to our next segment. So this has been a great conversation. Let's talk a little bit about gaming the conference is what we like to call it. First of all, I do want to, again, mention our sponsor, MCA Strategic Data, who has something called the Data Scheduler, the Scheduler app, which is available for iOS and Android, which actually includes a listing of all different conferences. It lets you look and see where they're being held, when, registration information, the whole 9 yards is there. So I recommend that you get that tool from MCH Strategic Data. And if you can't find that, come out to our website and we'll have a link to that out there. We'll also have a link to the Common Sense Media data that Francesca shared, and a call out to Omar and Kelly and Mike out at Common Sense Media and all their good work that's being done. So let's talk a little bit about these conferences that are coming up. One I just have to plug in 2 weeks. A little bit less than that, the 2nd through the 4th of June is the AAP CIC conference that I chair. And, boy, it has just come together just absolutely wonderfully. It's being held at the Capitol Hilton in Washington, D.C. Really, all people in leadership roles in publishing and a number of others will be there. There'll be a really exciting Going Global Day on the 2nd. So if you want more information about that, again, come out to the Ed Table Talk site, or you can go out to the AAP site under CIC, Content in Context. So let's go next to, Jeff, you mentioned the School CIO Summit being held in Atlanta later in June. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, let me go in order that they're going to happen in June.
So
please. We have the Council of Great City Schools. That's the 60 largest urban districts in the United States. They'll have a CIO annual meeting in early June. That's a great forum where they do it's kind of like a real roundtable, and us vendors listen to the districts discuss their issues. It's really a great experience. Then in late June, just before the ISTE conference, my friends at the Technology and Learning magazine, they host the CIO Summit. They actually host that twice a year, as well as some tech forums. They fly in instructional technology leaders and CIOs to each of these forums, and that's also another great event. And I don't want to steal Tim's thunder on ISTE, but we're big believers in ISTE at Gaggle. We actually throw a party for 1,500 educators on Sunday night. Every year we do this. It's not a reception. It's a party.
But I never get invited.
You have to know somebody.
There you go. So, Tim, tell us a little bit about ISTE, other than the fact that you're bummed you're not invited to a party.
I was just kidding. See, now that I've left ePals, he's inviting me. So that's
yeah.
So ISTE, for those of you who don't know, is the largest education tech conference in the U.S., held at the end of every June. This year it's in Atlanta at the Convention Center downtown. And I think it gets around 16 to 18,000 attendees, teachers, tech directors, principals, superintendents, curriculum specialists, all centered around tech. I'll be there. I'm advising a couple of companies now, sitting on some boards, but one in particular is going to be exhibiting there. And they are actually consolidating solutions. They're a SIS, LMS, HR payroll solution provider, sort of single sign-on into multiple product sets, and they'll be on the floor. So, right.
Great. And then lastly, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, start thinking about iNACOL that's coming up in November. I know that seems a way off, but that's in Palm Springs. You might want to be in Palm Springs in November. Mm-hmm. And in any case, iNACOL is a great conference, and highly recommend that if you're doing any distance learning and other kinds of online learning. Let's go back to now our You Can't Handle the Truth. We won't have much time to discuss the three. We have and have-nots. We have loose lips make security slips, and from the mouths of babes. So tell me, between the three of you, which one do you think is the truth?
I'll go. As a father of three daughters, I have certain gender perceptions. My daughters overshare. I know mine is false, and I believe the mouths of babes is false.
Okay, so
I agree with Jeff.
So I also agree. So that means that have and have-nots is the truth, right?
Well, we had somebody else we had some guests who guessed that as well. So it seems like a slam dunk that it's haves and have-nots. But in fact, it's from the mouths of babes that is actually the truth. Absolutely.
Wow.
So, it's always amazing. Some of these rumors could, in fact, be true someplace else, but in fact, it's from the mouths of babes. Actually saw that myself, and really amazing. So thank you for participating in You Can't Handle the Truth. It's always fun. Well, we're really getting it to the end of our show here. And again, really appreciate our listener participation and again, our guests who are going to share with us, are going to answer quickly the question. We say when somebody's leaving the elevator, this is not your elevator pitch, this is going to be when somebody's leaving the elevator, what would you tell an IT director who's dealing with the issues of student and data privacy? But before we get to that, I do again want to thank our hosts, not our hosts. I want to thank our sponsor, MCH Strategic Data, for all of their wonderful work and for their support of this show. Our next show is going to be on June 24th at our usual bat time, same bat place. You can also listen to us on iTunes. You can listen to us at Blog Talk Radio, and the next show is Big Publishers: Can the Spanish Armada Transform into the British Fleet? We have Dan Caton, we have Jaume Barcelo from Spain who's going to be on that show, and we have one other guest we're still lining up. So to our guests, what would you tell an IT director? Francesca.
Use the parade and help everyone be transparent. There you go.
Tim?
What data do you collect? How do you use it? And put it in the agreement you'll have with our school district.
Perfect. And Jeff, to you, well, finally.
It'll be okay. We'll solve these problems together.
That's perfect. Well, thank you all for being on Ed Table Talk. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.